Hey everybody, Pete from the GenWell Project here one more time with a connected conversation as part of the GenWell Project, the human connection movement that has been working to educate people about the importance of human connection since 2016, and more importantly, catalyzing people to take action to take care of their own health mentally and physically, increase their happiness, increase their longevity, empathy, compassion, resilience, all the things that we all need right now as we're going through these challenging times of the coronavirus and the pandemic. Connected Conversation is a series of conversations that we launched at the start of COVID-19 in order to keep people connected to ideas, tips, tools, and more importantly, maybe people who have the ideas and solutions that can help keep us positive, moving forward, and energized as we approach and address many of the challenges that we face. A huge thank you to our volunteers who help spread our message, who share our information on social media channels, and certainly who support us in our social media and also in helping execute Connected Conversations. And to our incredible partners at JP Wisers who help us spread the message about the importance of human connection, both internally in their own organization and also in spreading this message across the country from coast to coast, because we all make the world a happier and healthier place by getting people connected, especially during the pandemic. I'd like to welcome in our guest today from Park People, the incredibly talented Jodi Lastman, who's going to share with us lots of ideas, tips, tools about how we can use our local parks to better use, especially as we go into some more tightened restrictions in regards to COVID-19 for the protocols, and also just because we get to the colder, darker days of the winter. So Jodi Lastman, great to have you here on Connected Conversation today.
Great to be here as always, Pete.
You are always amazing to have on here. And, you know, we had a conversation in season 1 of Connected Conversations, and honestly, the feedback from people about, you know, the message. And I think a lot of people, Jodes, don't think about how important our local parks are. So I'm really excited about to have this conversation again. And I think especially because we're 7 months into a pandemic and with the onset of the fall and winter coming ahead of us. But before we start the conversation, let me give you an introduction. Jodi is the marketing and sponsorship manager at Park People, leading the marketing for the organization, helping awesome things happen in city parks across Canada. She played a key role in the organization's transition to a national organization. And in the 4 years that she's been in her role, she's doubled the reach and fundraising capacity of the organization. Ladies and gentlemen, and Jodi, welcome to Connected Conversations.
Thank you very much.
So, Jodi, let's jump right in. And the first thing we always do with all of our guests is we make sure they're doing okay. So I know when we first met, which I think would have probably been end of May, maybe June, I think you were holding up okay. But here we are 7 months in, and I just want to do a check-in with you and see how you're holding up through COVID-19.
Thanks, Pete. I mean, I think that, you know, with the recent restrictions, you know, I lost my twice-a-week workouts that were meaning more to me than they ever had before. I gained getting a kid back in school in person. So, you know, there's goods and bads, but it all feels a bit tenuous, you know, right now. We don't know. There's so many things we don't know. But like I would say overall, you know, we're doing well. Everything's going okay.
Yeah, I think that's I got to say, that's a pretty standard answer from just about everybody that we have on the show, which is, hey, there's good days, there's bad days, there's positives, there's negatives. And I think the important part is for most of the people, certainly the people we've had on the show, the fear of not having some of the fundamental needs like food, water, shelter, safety, and security are not on the table. So from that perspective, we're really lucky. And those other pieces that we struggle with, you know, the good thing I think is knowing that we're not alone and that everybody's going through this together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we're obviously in a very comfortable position in terms of the core stuff. But let's also not forget how core, like our social lives are, to our well-being. I think we saw that with the kids, and a lot of people are talking about like the impact that has on kids, but I think we shouldn't forget that adults need that stuff too.
Jodi, you couldn't have taken the words out of my mouth any better. I think it's interesting. We've gone through phases. Initially, obviously, seniors were the focus because we saw the tragedy that was happening in seniors' residences across the country. And now I think, we got kids out of school in March, so therefore they weren't the focus. As it dragged on over the summer, no camps and other activities. I think that certainly was cause for a little concern. But I think right now, as we head back into September, some kids still doing remote learning, some kids in class, some concerns about the safety of it all. And now with lockdown happening, I think your point is truly, and I know many people, we'll call us middle-aged working folk, who are also struggling with their own, ups and downs, whether that's kids at home from school, whether that's employment, whether that's running a business. I think, it really does become clear we all need each other and that we're all going through this, together, although slightly differently.
Absolutely.
So can you do me a favor, and for the benefit of those who haven't seen our first interview in season 1, can you tell us a little more about what Park People does as an organization in driving people to make better use of our parks in this country?
Yeah, absolutely. So Park People is Canada's city parks organization. I often say, we know that there are organizations that are standing behind our national parks, and we treasure those, and we have province that stands behind our provincial parks, but there are city parks all across Canada, big and small, and Park People is the organization that represents the importance and gives voice to the people who care so deeply about those parks. So in some cases, they're volunteers. In other cases, they're municipalities, they're urbanists and thinkers, funders, media. And we do a number of things. We provide funding and resources to people, but we also provide like the leading edge research on the subject of city parks, as well as on the ground programming in our core cities, most notably Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver.
I just think the work that you guys do is so important. And again, as we come through a pandemic, as you talked there about national and provincial organizations that were supporting the other parks that are available to us, what went through my head is, oftentimes we have these ideals of, hey, I can't wait until I go out to Banff and I go for a big trip, and we take the family and we do that trip. And that's an aspiration that we can plan and we can look forward to in what I will call better times. But right now, I think some of the simple things of our local parks have become even more important because, A, those big family trips and travel just aren't on the agenda like they used to be. And now I think our parks, our local parks, have become even more important than they've ever been before. Have you heard anything, or is there any research that really backs up just how important our local parks are right now?
Sure. And I'll share that with you. I mean, we know that, like, we did a survey of Canadians, 1,200 people across Canada, and 3/4 said that their appreciation for parks has increased during COVID. Nice. 82% said that parks have become more important to their mental health during COVID. And also just in terms of people who value the social connection of parks. Interestingly, it's people who live with others do feel that the parks are very important to them, but even more so those people who live alone, who are a great number of people in Canada. The other thing, just to underscore what you said, Pete, is just that we go to our national parks once a year if we're lucky, and we have one like Rouge Park. Maybe we go a few times a year, but this is like the day-to-day, right? This is the minutia of our day-to-day lives. Like, I've been lucky enough to go for dog walks every day in the park, and I can say that not just the walk and not just the nature, although both very, very highly valued and I would say are making a measurable difference on my life. But seeing people doing things, slacklining, walking, playing, sitting in a circle, safely engaging with one another. Like it restores your faith in humanity. It makes you feel like you're part of something bigger and not so on your own. And I think those are just some of the main things that we are hearing Canadians say about why parks are so important to them right now.
I think this is why this conversation is so important for people to hear. You just said three. When you think of your local park, you're like, yeah, it's that place just up the street, right? Like or around the corner, or down the street, or the next block over. And you said three things: connect, nature, and health, physical activity. And I think, how often do we stop for a second and we actually say, holy cow, I didn't realize that my local park brought that much to my life. And I'll tell you, my local park, prior to COVID-19, I had this conversation with my wife the other day. I said, I bet you if you looked in our park most days after 5 o'clock, after the local school kids had gone home, I'm going to tell you that other than scheduled baseball or soccer or other activities, that there really wasn't anybody in the park. Mm-hmm. And now when you drive by that park or ride by that park every day, there's a boot camp that starts at 7 a.m. There's one at 7 a.m., 8 a.m., and 9:15. Then all day long, there's different activities. The school's back in, so there's some kids out there. And then afterwards, from all those things that you just mentioned, mm-hmm. It is, I think, again, like many things of the silver linings of the pandemic, we had to actually have this shock to our lives to actually recognize what value our local park was that is 5 blocks away, 2 blocks away, 10 blocks away, but just the opportunity to take your dog for a walk, to go see some people, get some exercise, connect, and all those things. Was the awareness there before, Jodes? Like, did we need this to wake up?
First of all, I love that you called me Jodes. The only person that ever called me that besides you was my husband when we first started dating, I think on our first date. Did we need that? There are certain people for sure who have always valued the park and have used their parks and have cared about parks. They are urbanists. They are people who probably don't have private backyard space. And, people who have a real connection to nature and volunteerism and have sort of like what do they call that, the entry point, right? Like they have mm-hmm. certain affiliation. What I think you're also referring to, which I think is really interesting, is the way that the pandemic has turned our lives inside out. So a lot of things that might have otherwise happened in private space, like birthday parties or exercise or those things, we're now seeing in a public way. And they're like, I find it so heartwarming and like affirming to, you get to see like people's lives a little more. People talk about the fact that like we all just are quite siloed from one another, and that we're at a lot of now life has become confined to the 4 walls of our home and is sort of happening in private. I think that it's quite something to see the extent to which we're now sharing in each other's lives through sort of a visible presence in parks. So I think that that's kind of shifted things where people who may not have otherwise thought of their park as their place, their like second home or their extended backyard or only backyard, are now thinking about their park differently. Like, why would they, why did they need to exercise indoors when they could do it outdoors? Or why have a birthday party in your house when you could have it at the park? I mean, those cellophane balloons, I see them all over the place. People are celebrating in public. It's kind of incredible.
Yeah, I think you and you just touched on something else. I was on a call just before I got on here, and a friend of mine just talked about how disappointed she was that gyms were closing again. And again, I just said, hey, you should tune into the Connected Conversations because I think, again, more than ever, there's the opportunity. Use your local park, get out there, whether it's a walk around a track, whether it's the dog walk, whether it's and the connecting with other dog walkers or parents or whatever. There's so much happening. And, maybe it is about the rediscovery of local parks. And I know you talked about people liking their parks more. Is there any, and this is even pre-COVID, is there any, and I know you have it, which is the research that really talks about the health benefits of, everything that's going on? You talked about mental health in the sense that people were using parks now and feel like mental health is the benefit. Is there any greater benefits to parks that you guys had previously? Because parks have always provided it. It's just whether we took advantage of it and recognized it. Is there any other research that you have that really speaks to the value of parks in our communities?
For sure. I mean, the first thing to know is like 86% of Canadians live in cities. So, that's a lot of our population that's living in pretty close quarters. But we also know that like things like knowing your neighbor is the number one variable that's linked to a higher sense of trust and belonging in a community. So belonging and trust are actually huge factors. Like if you don't, 38% of Canadians say they don't feel they have a stake in their local community. Like that's a pretty significant number. We also know that, I'm sure, you're very familiar with all these stats about like loneliness being sort of the next smoking, epidemic.
Yeah.
That like there are so many people in our society, almost a third of us, who report persistent loneliness and social isolation. So, we know that like it's not just about the park, it's about what's happening at the park that could draw people to one another. And so like we know things like 48%, the likelihood of people engaging in their park is 48% higher if there's a programmed activity. It's the same thing. I'll give you a great example. And you were talking about workouts. My, person who I was going to for these small group workouts, does them also on Zoom. Zoom, has its challenges for me from as a workout platform. But she was talking about what if she didn't do them live, but there was just like a bank of workouts that you could do. And it's such a weird thing because why would it matter because it's the same video, whether it happened 2 days ago or is happening right now. But the fact that it's happening now gives me reason to log on and go to that Zoom event. It's the same thing with the park. It's like, yeah, you could go to the park or you could not. Yeah, you could, go for a walk or not. But then if there are other people going for a walk, if they're meeting at Tuesday at 2:00, like suddenly it's just entices you more and more to do that thing that we have barriers around going, beyond our immediate comfort zone. And, people have different ways of operating in the world. But for many of us, having stuff in a schedule and with other people not only reduces the social isolation, but simply gets us to do the thing.
Yeah, I think it's such a great comment, Jodi. I think group exercise is number one. It is a schedule. Number two, it's a bit of accountability, which is if you have your friends or you're meeting people to go, and then without question, it is about connection, and it is the opportunity to feel like you belong to that community, whether that's a spin community, a boot camp community, a running community. You can pick the example because there's 100 of them out there as to why we gather with other people to do things in our lives. And I think it's a really powerful one. And to your point, and this is why Park People and Genwell Project are so synchronistic is, and that you are one of our community partners, is all our goal is to be the aggregator of good. And, we want to bring together the organizations that benefit by getting people connected. And, it doesn't matter, human connection transcends every illness, every crisis, every disease, and parks and connection are part of the solution for people, because it's where people get a chance to spend time in nature together. And as you said, connection, nature, and health. Like, is there any other magic, in the world? And again, I say this, even in this conversation, Jodi, I want to say you've shocked me into, holy cow, like there is so much that comes out of our local parks that most of us don't even look at it. We just kind of go, it's a grassy field, and that's the extent of it. So, again, love that you're sharing all this stuff. So I guess it's now October 13th. We're a couple weeks away from Halloween, which will be unique in itself this year. Maybe there'll be some parks used for some Halloween kid parades, as an opportunity to do a physically distant. That's actually, I'm literally thinking that may be the idea for our street. We're literally trying to figure out what the heck we're going to do. Maybe it's a parade in a park, and the parents can all sit on the sideline, and kids can go from, I guess, although you can't give out the candies, maybe that's too close. We'll figure that part out. But, we got colder, darker days ahead, and our parks, are still there. They may be colder. They may have some snow in them on occasion. But, is there things that park people has planned? Are there ideas? Are there encouragements that you're, giving to people in order to, get prepared for the fall and darker, colder days of the winter? Because, the park doesn't become less useful as long as we get prepared for what comes ahead. So what are you guys working on?
Thanks. We have some pretty exciting programs. Nothing is absolutely confirmed, so I can't talk about it as a done deal, but we are certainly very eager to be helping people spend winters in the parks. I think this is a huge opportunity, actually, because I plan on using my park more than I have in previous winters. I think we all should be really getting ready to do that. And if we're fortunate enough to have the right gear and all that stuff, that should be something that we're all planning on doing. But Park People has some interesting plans for programming that'll be safe and socially distant. In the past, we've done, for example, walking programs and things like that can be done very safely, but there are other ideas. Obviously, we think skating is going to be huge, walking, anything really that you can do safely indoors is done more safely outdoors. So, you could do literally a picnic, you could do a disco, outdoor silent disco, you can do anything in a park. I mean, that's the best part of my job, to be honest. But one of the other things that I think is really exciting is we worked on a program over the summer with the Balsam Foundation that was called the Community Resilience Program. And it's on our website, but it was really about having park ambassadors in higher needs communities who were helping people who live in apartments and therefore face some higher more risk and more challenge around exiting buildings. And there's just so many other variables to be thinking about. Really help people. They formed these groups, as we were talking about, with groups being so important, to get people walking. And when I say groups, they weren't walking in a group, but they were groups of people who were communicating with one another. So sharing photos of themselves walking in the park, and they were tracking their steps, and there were incentives like just small gift cards and things for people to encourage them to get out. And so these are programs that we hope to extend through the colder weather, because they're going to be more important than ever. In the summer, people, it's easy. It's a lot easier. It's going to get more challenging for people as the colder weather comes. There's other challenges actually that we're facing too, in terms of thinking about parks. One that is that, public health and parks, they're all city departments, and they have to work hand in hand. So whether there'll be permits issued for things like pumpkin parades or some of the things that would have happened in the past is still up in the air. And frankly, park people cannot, weigh in on an issue like that, because public health obviously absolutely comes first. But we know there are some simple things like, right now the City of Toronto clears paths only that are designated to get you from one spot to another. So from, like that are actually transportation routes, but they don't clear paths that aren't. And so, all of those opportunities for walking in like a loop, in a park, or walking through the park or walking around, like those aren't going to exist once the colder weather comes, and particularly for seniors, obviously, who have, more mobility issues, things like ice and snow, could be lethal. So it's going to be important, I think, that spaces are made clear and accessible for people. And then another one that people often overlook are bathrooms. Um, Again, City of Toronto, there are some actual like infrastructure limitations around keeping bathrooms open in the winter because of freezing pipes, and most of our bathrooms would close this month because of once the cold weather comes. But like, could we have portable bathrooms for people so that they can use the bathroom and be outdoors more? Like, it's just, they go hand in hand. It's not something people love talking about, but it's a fact of life. If you're going to go somewhere and spend time outdoors, you need to have the comfort of knowing that if you need to use a bathroom, that there's one available for you.
It's amazing listening to you, the things that the average person probably doesn't think about when we're talking about our local parks and what needs to happen in order to make them accessible for everybody. And those are some really great points. The word that came to my mind as you were talking about, the pumpkin parade or other activities is, I think creativity is we need people in our communities to step up and to be as creative as possible. At the end of the day, the cities across this country have laid out the COVID protocols. We're all smart enough to listen and understand those protocols, and nobody, I hope, wants to put anybody else's life at risk. But let's figure out how we can use our parks to, in a safe way, help keep our communities connected, help keep them active, help keep them, out in nature, all the things that we know are good for people's mental and physical health. Because I think, as you've stated, we need it more than ever. And, we need leadership across the country, from individuals, from politicians, local councillors getting out and setting up their local event happening in their park. I think, it's critical that we all step up right now and try and make that part of the reality.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, it's difficult in large bureaucratic systems, as we've seen, with school boards and stuff, to do things outside. And there's just like these blanket, just policy decisions that get made that really make it hard to be nuanced about what's safe and what's not. And that's going to be the challenge for sure.
Yeah. Any great stories since the start of COVID-19, in local parks across this country, of people, of those leaders, of the people who have recognized the importance of getting people out, getting them connected, getting them healthy, getting them back into nature? What are the stories that you've heard that have inspired you during COVID-19?
That's a good question. So many things. And you say creativity, and people have just been astoundingly creative. I'll give you a couple of quick examples.
I love it.
One is, Toronto Arts in the Park. So the Toronto Foundation has for many years been doing these free performances outside the downtown core and parks. And a group that is the like artists in residence at Dufferin Grove Park Clay and Paper Theatre, faced the challenge of not being able to perform in parks this summer. And so they normally have these enormous paper mache creations that people perform in.
Yeah.
And I love that they went from this enormous scale and size that they're used to working in, and they did workshops and performances around these tiny toy theaters. So they took the enormity of their work and they instead moved it into the screen, but not just in the screen, but very deliberately using this small sort of box theater. And they taught people how to make their own performances that were based on, it was called Third Eye, and it was the view from here, and it was about their learnings and the insights that have been generated during COVID. So I thought that was just a great, like you were talking about creativity and like the way that this horrible experience has caused us to have to think in whole new ways. And I think thinking about how artists do it and, you know, is just really inspiring. The other stories that really I thought were particularly impactful for me were, we had this incredible group of community animators, this Isaac and Hambo, Abdul, Anisha, and Sharon, 5 of them that were all working in underserved communities with outreach workers to get people out of their apartments, taking their steps, doing fan dancing or Tai Chi or whatever their activity was, and snapping photos and sharing them with one another. And just like the incredible impact of this community resilience program that we had going on this summer was incredible. But more importantly, that there are people in our communities who care so deeply about each other and others that they do that work day in and day out to connect with other people, to make sure that people are okay, to find out, you know, if they don't show up or they don't hear from them, like what's going on, is everything okay? These are the people who, when we said to them, do you know other people that could help you spread the word? Of course they do. They know everybody because they are the glue in their community. So these people this summer went out and led like hundreds of people individually doing walks in their communities and getting people outdoors, and people who frankly, you know, may not be the types who are inclined to do a lot of fitness, walking, or, you know, exercise, were getting out because they were suddenly feeling motivated because there was a person that was holding them accountable. Or maybe it was the gift card. Like, you know, who knows? Like, there's so many different things that motivate people. But these folks were just absolutely incredible and did such an incredible job addressing a specific need. Because, you know, again, I totally, you know, the stuff around we're in it together. Yes, we are, but differently. And a lot of folks living in underserved communities in particular had very unique and very frightening and isolating experiences that needed to be addressed. And their parks are not Trinity Bellwoods or Cedar Vale, or they don't look like those places. And so how do you make people, help them feel safe when there were already pre-existing safety issues in those communities? So, you know, it's a different program, but it's so valuable.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting when I look at the facts and figures behind human connection, and the fact that, you know, it's now the single largest indicator of happiness, reduces anxiety and depression, increases empathy, compassion, resilience, strengthens our immune system, increases our longevity. You know, even if it isn't about getting around the track, even if it isn't about, you know, setting up some type of a play date, maybe it's actually just sitting down on a physically distanced picnic on a couple blankets. Maybe it's, you know, sitting on either end of a park bench and having a conversation. Maybe it's some of the, you know, and I've heard this a million times since COVID started. Maybe it's the simpler things in life that, you know, we can all inspire each other. And maybe it's frankly just a hi, how are you? And how's your day going? You know, we know that, you know, the benefit of human connection doesn't just come from those deep, meaningful relationships we have with our loved ones. It happens because of those casual collisions that we have, you know, on the track, in the park, you know, on the bike path or on the walking path, all those things that, you know, bring us in that collective area called our local park. And I think, you know, again, part of our message, as you know, as the Genwell Project, is if I can actually help your community understand how important human connection is and all the facts and figures behind it, I think it actually encourages people to actually say, hey, you know what, even if I don't go walk that track or I don't go and do something, at least I can go over to the park and actually just sit there and maybe wave at a few people and recognize that I'm not in this pandemic alone, even if I am in a bachelor apartment or condo or wherever you are, and that we are, as you say, all in this together, although we might be experiencing it slightly differently.
Yeah, I just would underscore, like, I find, and I don't know if there's research to support the benefit of this, but I do find seeing other people together is actually quite uplifting for me. I think it just, again, underscores my feelings about like how amazing people are, and seeing, I don't know, like seeing someone sitting with another person talking, or with a younger and an older person having a moment, or a person and a child, or a couple, like, this is like what you get to witness when you're in the public realm, that you don't get to see inside your house. And it's pretty fascinating, and again, very heartening. Like, when I'm out in the park, for the most part I'm by myself, but I'm just so flooded with positive feelings looking around me at other people. And it's not just because I work for park people, but maybe that's a small part of it.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen anything specific to seeing other people, but I think Maslow would have told us that that's part of belonging, and just recognizing, hey, wouldn't it be terrible? And this is what I think we all need to work against as we get into the colder, darker days, of going to your local park and looking outside your door and on your street and not seeing anybody. And I think this is why the work that you're doing to spread the message and fill people's brains with ideas, and how they can better prepare themselves to get ready for the colder, darker days, whether that's about the clothing that they're in, or whether that's about the activities that they can do, or maybe it's even about the coordinated activities that some of your leaders across the country have organized. But I think it's all of those things together that will set us up for success, so that we can still see each other, so that we can still be inspired by recognizing, A, we're not in it alone, that we are all in it, even though we're experiencing it differently, we are all here. And that, and as we often say at Genwell, is that we will get through this together, and get back to the face-to-face connections that we know make us happier and healthier. But all this stuff in between is important as well to help us get there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you said, and as you were speaking, I thought about it again, was just about, you were talking about your community and your community's thinking about how to address Halloween. And like, the important thing about is to recognize that communities know their community's best, and the astounding amount of creativity, that we've seen from groups across Canada around ways of doing safe programming, either in their park or around their park, or even some of the virtual stuff that we've seen is just like so creative, not just I have an aversion to like the idea of nature through a screen, through the shield of a screen, but some of these folks have really done incredible work. For like, one of them did like had a workshop on how to understand bird songs in the morning, and then they invited everybody to go outside in the morning and record bird songs, and then they put all the bird songs together into like a recording where people could enjoy and experience what others are hearing outside their door at 5 a.m. Like, just people are so, I mean, we've seen that we're so creative, we're so resilient, we're so able to make good of circumstances that have been thrust upon us. I find that astounding, and I think like that's what parks are. They're there to remind, like, we see each other in ways that we just don't get to see each other in our private lives.
Maybe just another one of the silver linings that is coming out, that the great pause has allowed us the opportunity to think more creatively, to allow people to step up in their communities and in their local parks and take a more leadership role. Because even, whether it's GenWell, whether it's the pandemic, all we wanted to be was a catalyst that got us to do this. Now we don't need the catalyst, because the catalyst is actually called COVID-19. What we've shifted our focus from being the catalyst, which we'll get back to. But right now it's about educating people about the importance of connection. And if the pandemic has allowed people to be more creative because they understand the importance of connection and nature and health, well, that may just be one of the greatest silver linings that's coming out of this whole thing. And let's hope that when the pandemic is over, that we don't just jump back into some old ways in that fast-paced, distracted world that saw many of us never use our local parks, because they're a beautiful thing and something that's available to us, really 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's like the script was very much guided by the big stuff that was monopolizing our time and energy, our jobs, our income, all of those, the big stuff. But I think that what we've learned, hopefully a little bit through this experience, is the value that the small stuff has in our lives, like that it is really the minutia of our everyday that defines our happiness, like, more than anything else. And so, yeah, how can we, it's going to be interesting how we're going to have both and keep them in perspective as things return to normal, which, we all want some return to normalcy, but there's that build back better term. And in some cases it feels like an opportunistic thing, like, okay, how am I going to find a place for my issue, as, in this, but in many cases these are real things that, like, have always been priorities, but just they've been sort of cast in a different light now. And I think that the connection to other people definitely is one of them. If the heat lamps and fire pits are any indication, about how much people want to be connecting, while they're willing to freeze a little bit to make that happen. And yeah, the stuff that we've seen in our parks, like, I would encourage people to get out there now, because it's still, really looking so lively and beautiful in the parks, and make plans, for the colder weather, if you can, both for yourself in terms of having, really good clothes and having skates or cross-country skis, but also thinking about, like, where you could donate items like warm winter jackets that maybe your kids aren't using anymore, you're not using anymore, skates, skis, things like, people are really gonna need, and not everybody will be able to access.
That's
easily.
a great idea. It's also, I think, just quickly before we wrap up here, is I think if we can create the habitual occasion, so, a weekly gathering with your neighbors, and you just say, hey, every Thursday, it's an open invitation, everybody come and meet in the park. We're going to bring a thermos of hot chocolate. We're just going to get together and shoot the breeze with the kids, and, whatever we're going to do, obviously following local protocols. Maybe by having that already as a ritual in our lives, that when the colder, darker days get here, when the first snow flies, you don't have to create it when people are anxious about, oh my God, what am I going to wear? What am I going to do? You'll be looking forward to seeing those people that have been part of your weekly gathering of the community or of your friends or whatever the case may be. So that's just something that kind of went through.
Yeah, no, I think
head.
you're right. Now is the time to build habits that are going to be able to serve you throughout the colder weather, for sure.
Yeah. Big shout out to my friend Pedro de Cahuna, who's made a few comments here. He wasn't so happy about closing gyms, but as we all know, we're all just trying to, and I'll make this quick comment about politicians and our public health officials. They're doing the best they can. None of us really know what's going on. So we're doing all we can to make this thing work for everybody.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of people suffering on every end of the spectrum. So nobody's particularly thrilled with what's going on in the world, but none of us really have control either. So, hey, Jodi, last time we chatted, I asked you at the end, as we ask everybody, is what do you look forward to doing when this whole thing is over? So I'm going to ask you again, when this is over, what do you look forward to doing?
I think gathering with friends without having to think about it so much, I've had to cancel a get together that was planned for this upcoming weekend, and there's just too many things going on right now for me to be able to do that responsibly. And so who knew that we were ever going to have to think this much about seeing our loved ones. So I think just the simpler version of seeing other people without so many considerations and thinking.
I think it's a great comment. Everybody I've spoken to today has said that their Thanksgiving was nowhere near what their normal Thanksgiving would have been like on the weekend, whether it was less people there, certainly less contact with whoever was there, and certainly, from multi-generational, which we all benefit from those relationships, a lot of things that had people fearful and less connected than ever before. So I think it's a beautiful and just the opportunity. And the GenWell Project wants to be that human connection movement that inspires people to come together when that day comes, the Human Connection Day, and it's going to be a celebration of all celebrations when we can finally do what you're speaking of. So I just see a comment here from Daphne Gordon, who's saying, I love to see lots of yoga doers in the park. I'm a big yoga fan, although my practice is a little lacking right now. So thank you for that, Daphne. I think it's awesome to see, again, people using parks in whatever, you said it, Jodi, whatever way works for you. I don't care if it's a boot camp, a yoga thing, a run, a dog walk, or just hanging out with your pals on a blanket, physically distant, of course. But it's all good stuff. That's what it's there for, right?
Yeah. The yoga has been wonderful to see. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of it.
And so where can people find out more about Park People if they want to learn more about the programs that you have in place and get some suggestions and ideas on how they can make better use of our local parks across this country?
Sure. Well, parkpeople.ca is our website, and we're on all the socials. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. And we're right now doing a great webinar series about 7 questions about COVID and parks that has covered subjects ranging from homelessness in parks to this building back better concept and what it really means to equity, and what, so many really, really challenging questions are being raised there. So we encourage people to get our newsletter and check us out.
Well, I hope everybody will head over to parkpeople.ca, check out their socials. No different than GenWell. I think what I love about your socials is that every day you're encouraging people to make better use of our local parks. And sometimes we just need that little spark, that little idea, that little catalyst that gets us to go, yeah, you know what? I should grab a couple of my pals and go for a walk over in the park. So I think it's awesome work that you guys do. So thrilled to have you guys as a community partner of the GenWell Project. And Jodi Lastman, thank you again for making the time to be part of Connected Conversations, because I think the ideas, tips, tools, and ideas that come out of conversations just like this are what will help people get through these challenging times in the very best way possible.
Thanks, Pete. And thanks for all of your excellent work with the GenWell Project.
Yeah, thanks, pal. Have yourself an amazing